We've heard a lot this morning already at the Merging Issues Forum, and I know I've learned a lot, I hope you have too, about both the challenges and the opportunities before us. But given that, and now we're going to ask ourselves this tough question of how do we narrow down which of these three options we have before us that's going to be the best. I mean, you know, y'all are from the faith-based nonprofit community, from the community colleges and universities, so I'm looking forward. I'm Dan Gerlach, just so you know, from the Golden Leaf Foundation in Rocky Mount. And so I'm excited. We've invested some money in the space, and so I look forward to learn more about it. So I guess anybody want to start?
Well, I mean, go ahead.
I picked strategy one about creating more differentiated programs. It seems like that's where a lot of this starts, that we're not having enough conversations with employers to find out what are the skills they value, and then how do we integrate that. The only little modification I'd make is not just higher education, but I think that needs to be shared with P through 16, not just with higher ed.
Actually, I mean, I'll continue talking, I guess. I'm involved in a very interesting experiment that Dan was involved with, is where one sector of industry in the biopharmaceutical manufacturing, they actually help put together a program that goes all the way from K through 12, community colleges and universities to deal with their work needs. And at NC State, that reflects itself in a center that has actual equipment that they use in the manufacturing of these pharmaceuticals. And we train people with getting science degrees. At the community colleges, we have an analog to that for people that are going to be operators. And then at Bright, at North Carolina Central, drug discovery.
Right.
And then all of those groups work with K through 12 teachers. And those K through 12 teachers have time in our labs. They have time in the industry labs. They generate curriculum tools. So that's a model that is actually a combination of one and two a little bit, right? Because we have companies individually that work with Kenan Fellows, for instance. BTech works with Kenan Fellows. The Bright Center works with Kenan Fellows. So we can all, it's kind of a great thing, but it's taking a lot of organization. So it's not easy to do this, and it only works in this sector because they are already organized. Right. They had an industry group. I'm not saying that you could probably do this with every single sector, but when you have an energy sector perhaps, or a banking sector, or maybe in our case it was a biotechnology sector, it's a pretty effective way to do things.
What motivated them to do this? Is it because they were having a hard time finding people? Because earlier
self-interest, right?
We talked about that companies weren't willing to do this because it didn't reflect on their profit and loss statement, but I would say that there actually is value for companies making these sorts of investments that pays off in meaningful, measurable ways.
In my case, as I was saying, it was an organized group. In the case of the Kenan Fellows program, that's almost company by company, and they're not organized by sector.
What's interesting is companies find out, in particular working with educators, how much that actually benefits the company's bottom line in terms of the engagement, the value it brings to the company in recognizing that connection to their own customer base, which is very much informed by these educators.
Right.
But there's a point.
So Raj, which one would you vote for? I'm just curious about that.
Actually, that's the point that I think that Rueben, articulated here, is that it's not a mutually exclusive scenario for us in terms of these strategies. It's an integrative approach that really builds upon each of these strategies in a strategic-oriented way.
I think the bottom line is how do you energize companies to do this on a regular basis with all the schools? If you look at Singapore, for example, and other countries, the interaction between industry and the school system, all the way from K through 12, is much more formalized than it is here.
Same in Germany.
So this idea of having a bank of companies, right, a list or a group that is willing to say, okay, here are our needs. Here we're providing opportunities for you to train students at all levels in this, and to kind of incorporate that into our normal educational system. That's really the way this should work.
So how do we twist this model a little bit to make sure that folks in rural areas of our communities can tap into this, where those companies might not be readily available?
Well,
and some of the, for example,
we tend to do it with local companies. For example, in Eastern North Carolina, there are economic sectors which may deal with agriculture. They're totally different from what you might find, let's say, in the western part of the state or Raleigh.
Right. So Laura, what do you see? I mean, you're from the West, right?
Yeah. I think one of the things that came to mind, also not necessarily pertaining to the businesses being involved, but programs that we have, such as what the North Carolina School of Science and Math is doing and trying to reach those
A broader spectrum.
those students who are from rural areas, whether it's through online education that then they come for weekends, and just thinking about sort of that project-based learning, strategy 3, the opportunities for that to be able to reach out into schools and
I think
Right.
a lot of
I thought, if I might, one thing I thought is, I'm with number one, the differentiated, and the reason why I am is when we listen to Mike Walden and Martin talk about at the onset about these jobs that are just plain disappearing. That's not only the future workforce, that's the current workforce.
That's exactly right.
So unless we figure out a way how to engage learners at all ages, it's not just those in pre-kindergarten through 12, not just those at the community colleges or universities. It's how do we reach people with the transitional skills? It's the loss of textile and apparel all over again.
That's right.
And so we're going to be very interested in how to reach different kind of people who may not be in the educational system. How do we connect them with it and show it's going to be worth their while? That's why I think the business input, which is the whole kind of overlay here, is so important. It's like, what are the demands of business? How can we make sure that the current and future needs are being met? So my vote's for number one, but I agree that I like them all too.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is the engagement of companies and business sector broadly, and I would include there even the arts and
That's exactly right.
and cultural opportunities, and teaching students as early as possible that there are opportunities and how you need to train yourself to do that.
Sure.
I came from Cuba. I came here at 11 years old, totally clueless about the United States. And it was not until I got some opportunities along these lines that I was able to come to a choice that, yep, education is for me. I want to get out of New York, and here's the way I'm going to do it, and it ain't going to be basketball.
I totally see you as a
Jump
sinner.
shot.
I
Yeah, I
don't
don't
understand that. I don't understand that.
One of the things in this whole spectrum of work that we're doing that we should focus on and connecting is connecting the businesses with the educators.
Right.
Those educators, like our Kenan Fellows, who actually have worked very closely with businesses in Eastern North Carolina, are critical to making what's being taught real and relevant to their students in the context of what they're learning and for what reasons they're learning, ultimately
And
to be able to do
unfortunately,
it.
parents that are really poor and parents that haven't had those opportunities are not in a good spot to advise students at that level. They just don't know.
How can you dream about a job you've never heard of, that
And
no one in your
also
family has ever taken?
knowing the role that math and science, for example, plays in those jobs. To a kid, those games are just games, and somebody made them, but it never could be me, right? That could do that. And I think getting over that hump is something that's really important.
And
But
I think
please.
that's interesting, thinking about what we heard earlier about the software that can help be that middle person. The way that can work in rural communities. I mean, those kids whose parents might not have any ability to help them navigate that, they're probably on smartphones and using apps. And so how can we use that technology to help channel
it's
them
not hard to
and
imagine
connect
a
them?
network of people from industry that it could be a mentorship kind of a program. But I think the involvement of the schools is crucial, so it can't just be at the student level. It's got to be something where you programmatically.
Right.
But I think we're going to have to get other agents, because there are some parents, like when we go and we have we fund a STEM project in a local high school or at a community college or something like that. We see that we are about, I guess, out of time.
Well, you're almost out of time. Have you solved our problem? We need futuristic jobs, and we need to make room for robots.
Well, we're close to it, but I think what we need is some more intermediary organizations, because not everybody trusts education institutions, so not everybody had a good experience. So how do we get faith-based institutions and others involved? That's going to be crucial to help knit this together. It's clearly going to be not one solution. It's going to continue to evolve over time. That's the only way I see to get home here.
But the key feature is to really engage companies and the educational system in general to make that happen.
Very
For the
nice
entire
conversation.
spectrum,
I really
P16.
appreciate your time. Excellent discussion, excellent topics. But the poll is out on stage, and let's go back to the stage.